A racist cop pulls over a black man, eager to assert his power, until he learns the man is the head of internal affairs and his own career is on the line. Subscribe to the channel and follow along to see how this powerful story unfolds. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Officer Brad Mitchell had been patrolling the city streets for years. Known for his aggressive demeanor and prejudiced outlook, he often targeted minority drivers under the pretense of routine checks. That afternoon, as he sat in his cruiser at a red light, he spotted a sleek black luxury car rolling past. The driver, a well-dressed black man in his late 40s, appeared calm and confident. Suspicion, or rather bias, immediately crept into Brad's mind. He turned on his siren and signaled the driver to pull over. As the vehicle came to a smooth stop, Brad adjusted his belt, making sure his hand rested near his holstered gun, and approached the car with an air of authority. "License and registration," Brad demanded, his voice laced with condescension. The driver, unfazed, handed over his documents without hesitation. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, his tone measured. Brad glanced at the name on the license. James Carter. The name sounded familiar, but he brushed off the feeling. "What's a guy like you doing in a car like this?" Brad asked, scanning the interior as if searching for something incriminating. James raised an eyebrow. "A guy like me?" Brad smirked. "You know what I mean." Brad stepped back, gripping his radio. "Stay right here," he ordered before retreating to his cruiser. He punched in James's license plate number, expecting to find something, anything that would justify his stop. But nothing came up. Clean record. No warrants. The car wasn't stolen. Frustrated, he decided to play hardball. Walking back, he tapped on the driver's side window. "Step out of the vehicle." James sighed but complied. "Mind telling me why?" "Just routine," Brad lied. "Hands on the hood." As James complied, Brad patted him down roughly, his actions more about intimidation than actual protocol. When nothing turned up, he stepped back, crossing his arms. "Where are you headed?" "Home," James replied. "I live in the city." Brad scoffed. "Nice house, I bet." James studied him for a moment, then spoke. "You enjoy this, don't you? Pulling people over based on the color of their skin." Brad chuckled. "Watch yourself. You don't want to say something that'll make this worse." "Oh, I doubt that's possible," James said calmly. "In fact, I think you're about to have a very bad day." Brad narrowed his eyes, his confidence unwavering at first. "And why's that?" he asked, scoffing at James's calm demeanor. He was used to people fearing him, complying without question. But there was something different about this man, something unsettling in the way he spoke with absolute certainty. Without breaking eye contact, James reached into his inner pocket. The motion was slow, deliberate, yet Brad's immediate instinct was to tense up, his hand flying to the handle of his gun. His fingers curled around the grip, his pulse quickening. "Don't make any sudden moves," Brad barked, the threat clear in his voice. James ignored the warning and smoothly pulled out a leather badge wallet, flipping it open to reveal an official identification card. Brad's smirk faltered as he read the words, "Chief of Internal Affairs, James Carter." The realization hit Brad like a freight train. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes darted from the badge to James's unwavering gaze. Internal Affairs, the department that investigated corrupt officers, the very people Brad had worked so hard to avoid throughout his career. And now, standing right in front of him, was the man in charge. Brad's mouth went dry. He tried to form words, but his voice failed him. His bravado, his authority, everything he had relied on in situations like these, crumbled in an instant. His mind raced. Had he said too much? Had he crossed a line? He already knew the answer. James closed the badge wallet with a decisive snap, slipping it back into his pocket. "You recognize the badge, don't you?" he asked, his voice even, controlled. There was no anger, no gloating, just cold, hard reality staring Brad in the face. Brad stammered, struggling to find an excuse. This was just a routine stop. No, James interrupted, his tone sharper now. This was racial profiling, and now you're going to answer for it. The weight of James's words settled over Brad like a suffocating blanket. He could feel his career slipping through his fingers. 1,000 justifications ran through his mind, a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, but none of them would hold up. Not against James Carter. James took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "How many times have you done this before?" he asked, his voice low, almost conversational. Brad hesitated. I don't know what you mean." James's eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "Yes, you do. How many black men have you pulled over, harassed, searched, without any just cause? How many complaints have been filed against you? How many times have you gotten away with it?" Brad's breathing was shallow. He didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had one, but he knew better than to say it out loud. He had lost count. James let the silence stretch, his presence alone enough to dismantle every ounce of authority Brad thought he had. Then, he reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a cell phone. He tapped the screen a few times before holding it up. "You're on record, Officer Mitchell. Every word, every action. This is being reported as we speak." Brad's stomach dropped, the final nail in the coffin. For the first time in his life, he was the one who felt powerless, and it terrified him. Minutes later, another police vehicle arrived, its flashing lights illuminating the tense scene. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, immediately recognizing James Carter. Their postures stiffened, understanding the gravity of the situation. The silence was deafening as Brad shifted nervously, his confidence crumbling with each passing second. James looked directly at the approaching officers and nodded. "Officer Mitchell, your conduct today was unacceptable. Your history of complaints has been overlooked for too long. But that ends now." Brad felt a cold sweat forming on his forehead. He had never felt such powerlessness before. His entire career flashed before his eyes. Years of bending the rules, of pushing limits, of believing he was untouchable. But now, standing before James Carter, the very man who had the authority to strip him of everything, he realized just how wrong he had been. One of the responding officers hesitated. "Sir, do you want us to take his badge?" James nodded. "Yes. Effective immediately. Officer Mitchell is relieved of duty pending an internal investigation." Brad's hands clenched into fists. "This isn't fair," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was just doing my job." James tilted his head. "Were you? Or were you abusing your power? Because today, you weren't just doing your job. You were profiling an innocent man based on the color of his skin. And that, Officer Mitchell, is a violation of everything the badge stands for." Brad looked at the other officers, expecting them to defend him. But they didn't. They knew better. They had seen the complaints. They had heard the whispers. And now, with James Carter standing before them, there was no denying the truth any longer. One of the officers stepped forward, a look of regret in his eyes. "Hand over your badge, Brad." Defeat washed over him. With trembling fingers, he unpinned his badge from his uniform and placed it in the officer's hand. The weight of the moment was crushing. His career, his authority, was gone. James took a deep breath, watching as Brad was led away. He had seen men like Brad before. He knew this wouldn't be the last case of misconduct. But today, at least one corrupt officer had been held accountable. As he walked back to his car, James exhaled deeply. "This is why I do what I do," he thought, "to root out men like him." With that, he drove away, leaving behind a lesson Brad Mitchell would never forget.